A pleasant morning to everyone. As we begin the class with another fruitful and significant discussion of a life-changing book that was ever written in history, allow me to start our presentation with a quote on appreciation. Michael Watson, an American author and businessman, has this to say about appreciation, which I strongly adhere to. He said, and I quote, "You will never get what you want until you are thankful for what you have." The quote underscores the importance of possessing a grateful heart for all that you have now, because it is through this grateful heart that you will be blessed even more. For this session, I will be presenting Chapter 1 of the book Appreciative Inquiry in Higher Education, a Transformative Force. Let me tell you something about the book. It was written by known AI practitioners Jeannie Cockle and Joan MacArthur Blair. The hardcover of the book consists of 256 pages with 12 chapters, with ISBN 13 number 978-111-8097359. The first edition was published on August 28, 2012 by Josie Bays, and it was written in the English language. These were some of the top reviews I got about the book that are worth sharing. It says, Jeannie and Joanne have written a book that points squarely at their North Star, fostering all that higher education can be so that it might be a transformative force for good in the world. This book is wonderfully timely, given the rapidly changing context and the demands on the higher education sector to step up to an even more important role in a fast-changing world. Jeannie and Joanne present the rationale for use of appreciative inquiry in higher education in such a way that provides those familiar with AI with more ways of using AI in the sector. And for those unfamiliar, it provides frameworks, methodology, and how and where to apply. The first chapter of the book is entitled Introduction to the Journey because I believe the authors considered it a journey to have written this book. The first chapter talks about three main points: the creative journey, provocative propositions, and emergent design. Let us talk about the first chapter now. Cockle and MacArthur Blair believes that higher education is one of the most powerful forces for social and economic good in our world, and that higher education can tap that force to create possibilities and transformation through appreciative inquiry. The book is designed for higher education practitioners who are undertaking work that focuses on the positive core of higher education and pushes that positive core to its highest reach. An appreciative inquiry is a major response to the challenges of higher education in modern times. So what is appreciative inquiry? According to Marjorie Schiller, the one who wrote the book's foreword, appreciative inquiry is a co-constructed practice informed by all those who work on creating the conditions for growth and change based upon seeking the positive core. In higher education, positive core is found wherever people are working in ways that enhance learning and enhance the mission and purpose of higher education. Moreover, according to Watkins and Moore, appreciative inquiry is a collaborative and highly participatory system-wide approach to seeking, identifying, and enhancing the life-giving forces that are present when a system is performing optimally in human, economic, and organizational terms. David Cooper Ryder in 1986 articulated AI in the 1980s, and since that time it has spread around the world and been applied in all types of organization. AI has spread around the world because of the many practitioners in all sorts of organizations who are generous worldwide community that support and foster this work. Cockle and MacArthur Blair describe their journey of writing the book as one that is creative because the framework that they used in writing a book about AI is the AI approach. They used a 4D appreciative inquiry framework, namely discovery, which asks the question, what gives life? Dream, which asks the question, what might be? Design, which asks the question, how can it be? And destiny, which asks the question, what will be? Part of their creative journey was defining the topic of their inquiry, creating an appreciative climate, and conducting discovery interviews. In defining the topic of their inquiry, both authors agreed that the affirmative topic would be AI as a transformative force in higher education, learning, and leading. The topic was born of asking themselves what we wanted for higher education and what did we long for. Part of their creative journey was creating an appreciative climate for working together as writers. They used agreements and promises for the duration of writing together, and as they progressed over the months, they revisited and revised them. Agreements are very positive processes of speaking, deeply listening, and defining the factors that will generate success. These were a few of their agreements. Ask brilliant questions of each other's work. Create and honor structure, deadlines, and outcomes. Play and be creative to bubble up the energy. Appreciate our differences. Deeply listen to feedback. Care for ourselves and each other. This setting of agreements did several things for them. It created a profound sense of responsibility to each other and a sense of belonging. And it created a commitment to have fun on the long writing journey. With this endeavor to write about appreciative inquiry, they knew they needed to begin by setting the stage to be appreciative. Part of this so-called creative journey is conducting discovery interviews. Their next step in using AI to frame the book was to develop a discovery interview guide for the topic of AI as a transformative force in higher education, learning, and leading. They based their guide on Moore and Watkins' generic set of questions. What did you value about yourself and others in this story? In the context of your story, what was the core factor that allowed this experience to be transformative? What wishes do you have for the future of AI as a transformative force in higher education, learning, and leading? In the interview stage, the authors talked about the practice of AI and how they brought that practice into their work and their lives, pulled out core factors that allowed these experiences to be transformative, and moved on to exchange their wishes for the future of AI as transformative force in higher education, learning, and leading. From these core factors and wishes, the authors followed an AI process of pulling out themes, and from these themes, they developed mind map images, visions, and key ideas that distilled into guiding statements called provocative propositions. These 10 provocative propositions represent the 12 chapters of the book. That is why it's titled Provocative Propositions, the Book Unfolding. Each provocative proposition will be thoroughly discussed as we proceed in the succeeding chapters of the book. The first provocative proposition says, appreciative inquiry as a transformative force is common practice in higher education. Focusing on what higher education is good at becomes common. And the second proposition says that appreciative inquiry is part of the majority discourse rather than the minority in higher education. These first two propositions will be thoroughly discussed in Chapter 2 of the book. The third and fourth provocative propositions are AI as a transformative force generates a hopeful view and fosters strengths-based ways of doing, leading, and learning. And educators recognize how transformation can be gentle and still have powerful outcomes. These propositions will be discussed further in Chapter 3, The Passions of Our Practice, one of which is a hopeful view. The fifth provocative proposition that arose from their appreciative inquiry into a book on AI and higher education is, AI is instrumental in critical processes of working difference and power and diversity. This will be discussed in Chapter 4, Critical Appreciative Inquiry, which deeply examines how the tenets of AI can be woven together with critical theory to open the door to whole new ways of meaning making, dialogue, and engagement. The sixth provocative proposition is AI resides as a powerful force inside the other turbulent forces of higher education. This proposition will be discussed in Chapter 5 of the book, which highlights the alive model for using AI in complex and difficult times. The seventh provocative proposition is leaders practice the skills of leading by utilizing AI to maximize opportunities for their personal growth and institutional momentum. This will be discussed in Chapter 6, Leadership, Possibility, and Appreciative Inquiry. The eighth proposition is educators recognize appreciation and inquiry as both personal and professional practices to be exercised and worked toward. Chapter 7 will provide a rich discussion on this proposition. It focuses on being an appreciative inquiry practitioner in higher education and explores the path to developing oneself as a practitioner or facilitator. The ninth provocation is AI is integrated into higher education from the classroom to the boardroom. This proposition will be discussed in chapters 8, 9, and 10 of the book. Lastly, the 10th proposition is in classrooms, AI translates into seeing the best of each student. Those learners then take AI forward into their worlds. Chapter 11 will talk about this proposition since the chapter focuses on AI in teaching and learning. AI is a framework within which, as people engage, the inputs and the outcomes evolve, which is called emergent design. This allows the process to be cyclical and dynamic as ideas unfold. The book is the result of undertaking an AI into the topic of AI as a transformative force in higher education, learning, and leading. The process of developing the book using AI is a reminder that AI fosters the intention to show up and offer the strengths one has and to allow those strengths to blossom. Whether through personal reflection, classroom teaching, leading, or mounting an institution summit, practitioners can bring into their work the simple concept of what is possible in higher education and using the appreciative inquiry process of dialogue and engagement to answer that question, and having answered it, generate outcomes not yet imagined. And here is my reference for this presentation. Thank you for listening.